In this video, we are going to talk about square roots. So before we talk about square root, I would like to take a look at the perfect square 1 to 100. So what is a perfect square? So let's say 1 times 1 is equals to 1. So 1 is a perfect square. 4 is a perfect square because 4 can be written as a product of two equal quantity, 2 times 2. 9 is a perfect square because 9 can be written as a product of two identical value. 16 is a perfect square because 16 can be written as a product of two identical numbers. So 25 is 5 times 5, 36 is 6 times 6, so on and so forth. So these are the perfect square from 1 to 100. And then I would like to introduce square root. So this is square root. What is a square root? Let's take a look. A square root of a positive number x is a number whose square is x. So if a square is equals to x, then the square root of x is equals to a. So for example, 9 is equals to 3 times 3, right? So the square root of 9 is equals to the square root of 3 times 3. So since 3 and 3 they are identical, that is just equals to 3. So we have 11 times 11 equals to 121. So the square root of 121 is equals to 11. And then we can say 12 times 12. 12 times 12 is equals to 144. Then the square root of 144 is equals to 12. So basically, for the perfect square, you are trying to multiply two numbers together, right? So when you see a square root, you are trying to undo the process of multiplying two numbers. So let's take a look. So let me give you a side-by-side comparison. So this one is using the property of square root on perfect squares above. So 1 times 1 is equals to 1. You take the square root of 1, you undo the process of 1 times 1, so you get the 1 back. If you look at the 64, 8 times 8 is equals to 64. So the square root of 64 is equals to 8 times 8. You get an 8. Actually, this is a typo, huh? I didn't notice that. This is equals to 8. And then 81 is equals to 9 times 9, right? So the square root of 81 is equals to 9. 10 times 10 is equals to 100. So the square root of 100, you undo the process of 10 times 10. So the result is equals to 10. All right. And then for the square root, I would like to introduce the symbol right there. So this symbol, the symbol right here, is called a radical. So basically for square root, you will see the radical of a quantity. And then this symbol, we call this a radical. R-A-D-I-C-A-L, radical. And then the quantity, we call that a radicand. And then for square root, the square root of positive is equals to positive. The square root of 0 is equals to what? 0 is the same thing as 0 times 0, right? So 0 is actually a perfect square that is equals to 0. But the square root of negative is undefined. So it's undefined. Because, so let's say I have a square root of negative 9. I am not able to write negative 9 as two identical values. So can you have two identical numbers multiply together, you get a negative 9? The answer is that is impossible. 3 times 3 is not negative. Negative 3 times negative 3 is positive 9. But you are not allowed to have negative 3 times 3. That is not okay, right? Because they are not identical. So basically, the square root of negative 9 is undefined. So when you see the negative square root of a negative quantity, the result is undefined. So let's do some exercise. I have some the square root of some value for you. I would like you to tell me what that equals to without using a calculator. So A, we have the square root of 169, right? So 169 is equals to 13 times 13. So you should have to practice your number sense a little bit. So 13 times 13, they are identical. So the whole thing is equals to 13. And then the next one is negative square root of 25. Does the negative affect the process of taking a square root? The answer is no, because this negative is outside of the square root. So that is a negative 1 times the square root of 25. 25 is equals to 5 times 5. So you have negative 1 times 5. The result is equals to negative 5. And then the next one is the square root of 121 minus the square root of 4. 121 is 11 times 11. 4 is 2 times 2. So that is 11 minus 2. That is equals to 9. And then the next one is negative 2 times the square root of 49. So the negative is outside of the square root. It doesn't affect the process of taking a square root. So we have negative 2. 49 is 7 times 7. So that is negative 2 times 7. We have negative 14. Let's box these final answers. And then the next one is 9 over 16, right? The square root of 9 over 16. So 9 over 16 is the same thing as 3 over 4 times 3 over 4. So that is just equals to 3 over 4. And then 144 and 81. 144 minus the square root of 81. 144 is 12 times 12. 81 is 9 times 9. So that is 12 minus 9 equals to 3. And then the square root of 0. So 0 is equals to 0 times 0. So that is equals to 0. And then the next one is the square root of negative 36. So negative 36, is this possible? The answer is no, because the radicand, the negative sign, is inside the square root. So the square root of a negative quantity is undefined. And then the square root of 14 plus the square root of 15. So if you think about that, 14 is like a 1 times 14, 2 times 7, right? They are not identical. So there is no way to find out what it is without using a calculator. The 15, 1 times 15, 3 times 5, 5 times 3, they are not identical. So we don't know what that is. So that means we will just leave it as it is. All right. So the next example, how about when the radicand is not a perfect square? So let's switch color for that. The first one, we have a square root of 8, right? So the square root of 8, square root of 8, 8 is not a perfect square, right? However, we can rewrite the 8 as 2 times 4. So 4 is a perfect square. The square root of 4, oh, there is a very important property that I want to remind you, is the square root of a times b is equals to the square root of a times the square root of b. So this is really just as root 2 times a root 4. So 4 is 2 times 2, so basically this is equals to 2, right? So you write 2. We let the the 2 goes first, and then followed by the square root. So that is your final answer without using a calculator. And then the next one is square root of 45. 45, 5 and 9, right? So 5 is not a perfect square, that is 5. 9 is a perfect square, 3 times 3 is 9. So that is 3 times root 5. Negative root 27, let's move up. Negative root 27, so that is negative 1 times 27 is 3 times 9. 9 is a perfect square. The square root of 9 is 3, right? So negative 1, the square root of 3, the 3 stays inside because 3 is not a perfect square. So the square root of 9 is equals to 3. 3 times negative 1, you get a negative 3 times root 3. All right, the next one, 75. 75 is not a big number. Can you make a quick guess? 75. What can you do for the 75? 75, we can rewrite that as 25 times 3, right? 25 plus 25 is 50. 50 plus 25 is 75. So 3 times root 75. So that is 3 times 25 times 3, right? The square root of 25 is 5. So outside we have a 3, this 3. And then the square root of 25 is 5. So 5 is now outside of the square root. And then this 3 stays inside. 3 times 5, we have a 15. All right, 72. 8 times 9. The square root of 9 is 3. The 8 stays inside. Is this right? Are we done? Nope. We can do something for the 8. So the 8 is 2 times 4. The square root of 4 is equals to 2. So you bring the 2 outside to multiply the 3. 2 times 3 is 6. So we have a root 2. Another way to break this down is 72 is equals to the square root of 36 times 2, right? The square root of 36 is equals to 6. You have a root 2. That works too. The next number, 484. So 484 is equals to, I see the 484. How about this? If you divide that by 4, you have a square root of 4 times 121. So 4 times 121, so the square root of 4 is equals to 2. 121 is 11 times 11. So 2 times 11 is 22. Don't forget to box the final answer. And then the square root of 54, 6 times 9, right? So 6 times 9, which one is a perfect square? 6 times 9, the square root of 9 is 3. 6, there is nothing we can do for the 6. And then 32. So 32, you can do it step by step, or you do 16 times 2. So let's do the 4 times 8 first. I think most people go this way. And then the 8, you can break this down one step further. 4 times 2. So the square root of 4 is 2. This square root of 4 is 2. We just leave the 2 inside. So you get a 4 root 2. Or you break down the 32 as 16 times 2. The square root of 16 is equals to 4. The 2 stays inside the square root. That's good as well. Alright, so that will be the end of this video. If you think the video is helpful, subscribe, like, share this out for me. I appreciate your help really, really much. I see you all in the next one.